Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Workflow Automation. This is part 2 of a 4-part series regarding IBM Cloud Pak for automation. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you that we will have a couple of polls throughout the webinar, so please be on the lookout for those so you can cast your vote. Also, in the drop-down menu of GoToWebinars, the Questions tab, please feel free to submit any questions you have throughout the webinar, and we will be sure to answer those at the end. And lastly, when you guys exit the webinar, there will be a short survey, and we'd love to hear your feedback. That's all I have, so enjoy the webinar, and I will hand it over to Integro's CEO and President, Scott Burt, to introduce our speakers.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. This is our second in a 4-part series of webinars on Cloud Pak for automation, and I think you're going to be really pleased with the presentation today. We've got some great speakers with us today. Go ahead and show that next slide there, Jim. Oh, I think you already are with your slides on there. But we're fortunate to have Jared Michael is with us here from Salient Process. Jared is the VP of Client Services and works with their clients to help successful adoption and implementation of these kind of technologies. Jared has been doing this for a long time, 20 years, and had his own company, AppSoft, which was sold to IBM and is now part of the ODM, Operational Decision Management products. And we've also got Jim Casey here, and Jim leads the creation of offerings. Jim is at IBM, of course, by the way, and Director, Digital Business Automation Platform at IBM, and leads the creation of offerings that blend AI and automation in ways that dramatically improve the productivity of people, which we need. Current work includes leading the offering team for the Cloud Pak for automation and related offerings. So we're flattered to have you both on here. Thanks very much. And interesting. We're all as we get to start off here, I want to just reach out and say I hope you and yours are all healthy and safe in this time with the coronavirus. And our hearts go out to everybody there. And interesting stories as well. Our own speaker. We're not going to be doing videos for everybody after I'm done here. Jared was actually doing a whole semester with his family on the French Riviera and doing France, and now they're locked up in an Airbnb on lockdown themselves. Right, Jared?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And well, it could be a lot worse. We know that for us, and there was worse places to be than the south of France. If you have to be locked up, but hopefully everyone, like Scott said, that everyone else is staying healthy, staying indoors, and hopefully we see this pass and brighter things in the future.
Yeah, thank you. So we also have a lot of attendees today, a lot of interest in this topic, including they're all over the world. We don't not only have a speaker in from France, but we've got guests from Australia and other places all around the world. So with that, Jim, I'm going to hand it off to you. Take it away, please.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody, and thanks for carving out some time. Yeah, we wanted to kind of address the current situation that we all kind of find ourselves in, and wanted to share what we're seeing as kind of this new normal and what we expect it to be. So I'm really trying to put this workflow capability that we have that we'll talk about today in the context of the situation that we're all looking at right now. And then I'll hand it over to Jared, and he'll take us into a deeper dive on some specific things that you can do, and then we'll take whatever questions that you've got. So when we look at just the overall situation and as part of the our strategy at IBM and how we want our offerings to help organizations, we're looking at kind of two windows. The first one is just this kind of hair on fire crisis management period. And that's really where we see ourselves for the now.
I'm just wondering if your slides are progressing. We're currently looking at the title slide.
Okay. Let me go back here, and I just need to change the sharing that I'm doing here.
And we see your icons on the bottom. I'm not sure if we're seeing the right thing.
Yep. Okay, let's try this. All right, better?
Now we see the edit mode for PowerPoint.
Yep, Okay.
Now we see your agenda.
So this should be good now. So when we look at the 2 time frames, so we have like right now, which is next 3 to 6 months, and we expect it to really be about cost management and just making sure what we're doing, we can recover, be as efficient as we can, and make the adjustments that we need to make to how we operate the business. But beyond 6 months, we view this situation that we're in right now as a kind of one of these inflection points in how business gets done, right? You know, we feel like this is going to drive people to want to do a lot more and through a digital route, more things through software as a service. And the main theme that we anticipate is going to be around what we're calling operational resiliency. So how can you build capabilities into your organization that allow you to withstand these waves of disruption that are coming through our supply chains, through how we interact with customers, through how we deliver the goods and capabilities that we all need out to our customers. And so we think this is really going to be just the beginnings of a new normal that really require this operational resiliency. And so depending on the industry you're in, those challenges may surface themselves in different ways. So airlines right now, you know, we have customers in this industry where it's really around customer service. You know, you have all these cancellations. How do you reach out? How do you manage these the disruption right now that airlines are seeing? You know, retail, it's moving to a digital model when your store can't be open. Financial services, this is one that I'm experiencing firsthand. I'm moving to a new house, and the backlog of mortgage applications is because people are working remotely in financial services, and in the past they were just working face to face for many of the steps in these business processes. And if we look at insurance in the U.S., but other parts of the world, you know, a healthcare payer, the amount of scale that they're going to need to build into their ability to process healthcare claims is going to be significant. And so this is kind of varying by industry, but one thing that we are seeing, and well, actually, before we get to that, I do want to ask a quick survey question. And so you'll see this pop up on your screen. And the question is really around, you know, I gave some examples in a couple of industries, but Jared and I are interested in knowing how much disruption that you expect to see to the business processes and operations that you have in your organization over the next, you know, between now and the next 6 months. And just go ahead and click on one of those. And so far we're seeing, we're still collecting responses, but we're seeing, yeah, so 0% are business as usual, right? And so that's pretty, not totally shocking there, yeah. So anywhere between some disruption and significant, let's say, significant disruption. Okay. Well, let's go to the next one here. So, but yeah, regardless of what industry you're in, there's kind of three phases to this thing that we anticipate. The first one is, how do you just get through now, right? How do you quickly adapt to any disruption that you might have? The technology that, and we'll talk about this today, is really it helps you do that is workflow. The next phase is, how do you start to get better visibility into what's happening? And there's a set of enabling technology here. There's business automation insights, but there's also a capability that Jared will talk about around BlueWorks Live. So this is really about, how do I get a dashboard to visualize what's happening in my organization by business process, right? But it's also, how do you even understand what business processes that you currently have, right? And then how can I make some changes to those processes, and what impact will those things have? So that's really, operational visibility for us is much more than just surfacing the information, but it's more about like, okay, well, what do you actually do with that? And then the third capability, or third set of things that we think people are going to need, is how do you then build in operational resiliency. How do you set it up so that you can withstand disruptions as they start to come through? There's some capabilities around what we call digital workers, but more importantly, it's just a general automation platform, a set of discrete automation capabilities that are integrated for you so that it allows you to have one place or one way of building and creating these things, and one way of your end users to interact with these automation capabilities, and one way to operate so that the TCO, the total cost of ownership, isn't so onerous. And so that's kind of the landscape that we see right now, right? And I think the most important thing is that we see automation and workflow in particular, what we're going to talk about today, as being a key technology for helping us navigate the current and what we believe to be the new normal of the situation that we're all facing right now. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jared to take us through the next section of our agenda.
Great, thanks, Jim. And yeah, I think again, like Jim's saying, we're probably not going back to where we were a few months ago, and we're looking at how we can act now, how we can act and build up for the future. And so looking at how we can take these technologies, and specifically today talking about the workflow capability, and make that a part of our journey and something that we can build on in the future. Next slide, Jim.
We can do this in grade school, where you can just make a beep sound and I can advance it.
Exactly, yeah, I love it.
Okay.
Yeah, and so building on Jim's pieces there, taking what we can do in the workflow side and adding some of the deeper pieces to that. So looking at the adapting initially, so just how can we build in the ability to act on this, and then growing that out. So workflow, if you're not familiar with the workflow technology, and this is the former business process management combined with the case management features that IBM has been offering for years, but really taking this to the next level. And workflow is all about basically inserting a layer between the humans and the systems. And that can certainly mean automation, but it can also just mean visibility. So you see on the left-hand side, this is kind of the business as usual type work where you don't have an oversight or workflow capability in place, and a lot of emails going back and forth, a lot of managing documents and spreadsheets, and swivel chair, alt-tabbing between applications and trying to get things right. And moving that more towards a more structured and more predictable way to do your business. But notice that we're not removing any systems, we're not removing any people from that equation, and that's really key there. And there's a number of benefits that come in this around predictability, guidance. Think about onboarding new users and how long it takes if it's a truly knowledge worker driven type of operation, and everything is in people's heads. How do you transfer that knowledge to the new workers? And it just takes forever, where if there's something more structured in place and more guided, then it really does help with that kind of work. And then add into that the core integration capabilities of being able to hand cases off to other knowledge workers and subject matter experts, or to be able to identify gaps or bottlenecks, or look for overdue or at-risk type activities. And so it adds a whole host of different benefits, both from the automation standpoint, but even just from a visibility and understanding how you're doing your work. Next slide, Jim. And so, looking at all of the different use cases that are out there, I mean, it certainly crosses industries, and we've been working in all these industries for years and years, and just thinking about how many places this can apply. Right, all the way from the typical insurance, healthcare type operations, where we're looking at being able to basically improve and cut down the cycle times, cut down the wait times of both customer service as well as patient care, and understanding how that turnaround time is going to improve that end user experience. Looking at utilities and being able to more effectively manage outages and manage payments and follow-ups. and certainly retail, looking at how workflows are established today and looking at the organizations that are not as impacted or not as hurt by the current situation, right? That those are the companies that have their workflows in line and in order and are adaptable enough that can swivel and start to move into other areas, whereas the more static ones are certainly hurting a lot more right now. Looking at banking, travel and transportation, again, it goes across the board, and the common theme here is that the organizations that are able to not just have a workflow in place and not just be able to assign tasks and do work, but be able to shift that and change that as needed and adapt to the changing conditions. And we talk about that, and in the past, changing conditions typically means months to years, whereas in today's atmosphere, that we're talking, weeks to days of needing to shift and adapt to those changing conditions. So again, the big piece here is understanding how you're doing your work, being able to implement and execute on that, and be able to have visibility and oversight to that. And next slide, Jim. And this takes us into. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, Jared, sorry, I don't mean to mess up your flow, but I think there's an interesting thing that I'm seeing. I don't know if you're seeing the same on this. Is that I'm seeing workflows get you can see some of the ones here. I would call them like big, right? So these are like the big verbs of your business. Like if you are onboarding is an example, I think, of a big kind of a business process. Like, how do you get new customers on board, or opening a new account? Those kinds of things. Those are pretty complex things. Or how do I process a payment? These are big things. Those, I think, are going to get really, really important in this as we move to this more digital world now that we're having less capability to be face to face with people. The other thing that I see happening though is I see workflows getting really, really small too. So like, as you have a remote team, as people are having to work from home, how can I get a shared to-do list? When before my team, we could have just been next to each other in the cube and could have just, tapped somebody on the shoulder. When you work from remotely, now it introduces this whole new set of challenges, and you really need to start to digitize some of these workflows that might have been small, that you might not have had to do in the past.
No, I love it. And I was actually thinking about that the other day, that a lot of the places where, again, those workflows are well established and are built resilient enough to handle some of these changes, you don't need to change your whole workflow to adapt to today's issues, right? There's certain pieces that you're going to need to shift, certainly. But if you've built those workflows correctly, you can shift certain pieces of those so that you go from, thinking about onboarding as the example, now you're much more focused on online onboarding or maybe call center onboarding, less about the branch. And if you haven't kind of had your workflow built in a way that can accept those shifts in demand and shifts in resources, then that it's going to hurt a lot more. And so that's a great point of how do you not only build your workflow to be kind of those larger workflows to be resilient as a whole, but those individual kind of micro flows to be able to capture and shift those without impacting your overall business plan.
Okay, so I guess we got another survey question.
Yeah. So speaking of workflow, I know that we have a number of people on the webinar today. If you don't mind answering, do you have a workflow solution today? And if you know, yes. And if you don't have one yet, no. And if you don't know, then put not sure. And this is it's a very high level general question. And workflow, define it how you picture it, right? So workflow can take on a number of different meanings. Certainly what we're talking about is the business automation workflow capability from IBM, but that can sit in a number of different places. You could have workflow, a workflow solution that you were built internally that you are buying from another vendor or have used from another vendor. So just looking for some feedback on that. All right, so good. So the majority of folks do have one in place, it looks like, with about 24% with no, and then about 20% not sure. So thanks for the feedback on that. And then kind kind of taking it to the next step, going from what workflow is and how it can help to, how do we start to get better visibility into this? And this also speaks to, what other benefits, what peripheral things are happening here that we can start to take advantage of. And so looking at using both insights as well as the BlueWorks Live capability is going to be a huge part in this piece. Jim, next slide, please. So the two capabilities that we're going to talk about, the first is around kind of the front of the tip of the spear, right? And the overlay, and what I like to think of is kind of the overlay to all of the automation portfolio. So as you're listening to all of the and watching all of these webinars, this capability, the BlueWorks Live piece, really does speak to all these different components. So it's a way for us to certainly document and capture our workflow requirements, but it also is able to capture additional pieces around decisions, around content, around capture. And it's a way for us to speak the same language with our business and start to collaborate and discover, how the business actually operates, and really work together to build those out over time. And it's been a great benefit to a number of customers. And it goes beyond just documenting your flows. It really does help you identify risks, be able to assign controls to those risks, being able to look for new opportunities and look for problem areas where you might see improvement, both from an automation standpoint as well as just from a general process improvement standpoint. And then looking to the other side of it, and this is another overlay technology that fits to all components of the DBA portfolio of the Cloud Pak for automation, where we're capturing information over time. And this information is being collected into a data lake that we can start to analyze, we can start to act on, we can start to train our machine learning algorithms. So being able to really visualize and then collect and start to work on that information. And that can be metadata about how your business operates around, due dates and cycle times and decisions that are being made, all the way to more business-oriented data. What's the average loan over the last 6 months? And being able to really mix and match that information on demand, right? And within microseconds, and then to also be able to do it in a way that's non-intrusive and very intuitive. So being able to have subject matter experts and stakeholders, not just geeky AI and IT people doing the queries against it, but having your true business owners start to collect and understand that information and be able to act on it. The next slide, Jim. And so the third part of this that I'm going to talk to is around just how do we identify and build out resiliency in the environment. So looking at both core technologies from IBM, such as the digital workers and the automation side, but also I want to talk a little bit about a new offering that we have that we're collaborating with IBM on, which is called DBA Sim. And this is a technology that's been built by Salient, but it sits right on top of the IBM platform. It works very well with some of the workflow and business operations technologies. It can import from BPMN and Visio and text files, but really the capability is meant to start to bring in these discovery maps and your process diagrams and your workflows and your process apps, and run actual numbers through them and start to see, if I have 5 workers instead of 4, or if I pay my manager $5 less per hour, what impact does that have on my bottom line? And start to build out these scenarios and understand how these different things can impact. And not only that, but you can see on the top left that we can start to identify core opportunities in those different pieces of the automation portfolio from IBM, right? So pulling out those value props and saying, here are some places where we think we might be able to apply automation. Now let's prove it and use simulation to start to build in some scenarios and really build out some different pieces. So if you're interested in taking this for a test drive, certainly reach out to myself or Salient after the webinar. But this is a great way for you to really start to build in some trust and some confidence that the automation technologies from IBM can benefit the organization, right? That they're going to do what we're saying they're going to do. It's not just a trust us, you'll find out in 2 years that it was beneficial. It's let's prove this out and find an opportunity. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim to talk about hyperautomation and wrap things up. But thanks for the time and looking forward to your questions.
Yep, thanks, Jared. And so we've heard about a couple of different technologies, right? So we started out and we talked about how workflows can help you define big end-to-end processes, but also some of the smaller little team-type processes, and why that's important in the world that we're living in now, because we got to be able to adjust and adapt things very quickly. We then talked a little bit about BlueWorks Live, which that kind of sits in the beginning of this thing. So if you're not really sure, like, okay, what is my process actually? What does that look like? You can then model that and look at it, and then you can start to monitor also the processes once you've deployed them. Are they really? What are they doing? Right? How many orders am I processing? Where might I be stuck? You know, how is my team? How effective is my team being? And then Jared just shared with you another piece that was around, okay, how do we identify the hot spots? Like, what are the good places where automation can provide the maximum benefit for me? And do some simulations to start to figure out and make sure that you're training your focus on the right places where this technology can have the biggest impact. This might feel like, oh my gosh, this is just a bunch of technology that's kind of scattered everywhere. But in fact, this is all part of one theme, and Gartner uses the word, I think it's really helpful, called hyperautomation. And what hyperautomation is really about, it's the convergence of a variety of different technologies into a platform, right? And so for me, as I'm looking, my job is to start to bring different technologies to market for you in a very consumable way, and do that in a platform and in an integrated way. So for us at IBM, it's about how do we bring in the capabilities we have for AI and machine learning, things from RPA, things from workflow, which we've talked about today. So workflow really, it's a piece to a bigger puzzle. And the reason why we want to do that is we want to start out on the left-hand side here. It's really a journey, right? Around we want to digitize the work that we're doing so that we can then adjust and adapt to change more quickly. Once we're able to digitize that, we can now start to apply more technology. We can apply AI to learn from that, to learn from how people are doing work, so that we can maybe offload some of the more mundane kind of tasks for them, so your people can focus on the most high value things. And when you get to that point now where we've got a set of this, almost like a digital worker working alongside humans to help humans be as effective as they possibly can be in their jobs, that's when we get to what we're calling, hyperautomation. The way that I'm going to deliver that to you is through this Cloud Pak for automation, right? And so all the stuff that we've talked about today is integrated into a common way of building, a common way of people to use, and a common way to operate this, so that you get a total cost of ownership that's good for you, a payback that's good, and you don't have to totally reinvent the way that maybe someone might want to use technology in your organization. We also give you a set of low-code builders so that you don't have to be an expert in all these different technologies in order to take advantage of them and create them. And so you can see in the middle part there, workflow, it's kind of the you are here, in the map. That's a key part of how we start to bring all these technologies together around a business problem. So if what we talked about today is interesting to you, there's a couple things you can do. One, we have, and we partner with Salient for this stuff, around, an automation workshop. And Jared, you guys have an offering like this where you can kind of sit down with customers, right? Maybe you want to talk about how you get started.
No, exactly, and that's a great question and a great point to kind of bring this home. The idea is, a lot of the things we're talking about are so big that it's hard to understand. Where do I get started? Where can I kind of just bite off something to get some value? And this is what, both with a combination of some of the technologies that we offer around BlueWorks Live, the simulation and some of the other pieces, but we also can sit down with you for a half day, a day, whiteboard, and start to capture some of these, pain points and issues, and start to tie those back to business outcomes and true value, to really kind of build some cases for why we need to move that forward. So that's a free offering that we offer. So certainly, again, we're happy to have that conversation and schedule something as a follow-up, but and we work very closely with IBM on building those out.
Yeah, and one more, on the product side, one of the things that we just announced, or should be coming any day now, is we've extended the trial period for BlueWorks Live. So it's out now to 90 days, so you can do it free. So if you just go to blueworkslive.com, this will help you understand, okay, with all this change happening, what are the processes and workflows that I've got, and then where do I want to adjust things in order to then be able to react quickly to this changing environment that we're in. I know that we're at the end of our time here. Did we have any other questions? Lindsay, I don't know if we had any other ones around. I think we had someone around getting started.
This is Scott.
Yeah.
This is Scott, and we do have a couple of good questions here, and let's see if we can get to these. Ashwath is asking, is the workflow in Cloud Pak the same as in BAW, Business Automation Workflow? And right now, BAW is not containerized, so what does that mean with regards to Cloud Paks? And one last question, it's a multi-parter. What about the support for Integration Designer, BPEL?
Yep, so good question. And so with the Business Automation Workflow, the entitlement to that is included when you buy entitlement to the Cloud Pak for automation. So really what we're doing is we want to allow people to take advantage of the new technology that we're shipping that's containerized, things like our business automation insights and our digital workers. Well, that's all containerized. We want to allow people to use that platform for it and not necessarily have to migrate everything that you've got today built on top of, let's say, the current business automation workflow in order to get there. Stay tuned though. We are looking at ways that we can help people transition to a containerized environment. And the reason why that's important is it allows you to deploy a much more flexible infrastructure than if you were to just install this on your own hardware. So we're looking at ways to help our customers move there. Stay tuned on that. We have, I think, some pretty great things in store in in the near term here for the evolution of workflow. But the important thing too is we're also not going to force our customers to then just move everything that they've got today. So entitlement in the Cloud Pak will continue to have the on-premises capabilities that we have. Our on-prem capabilities will always be included in that. So if you have entitlement to the Cloud Pak, you can use pretty much anything in the digital business automation family. There are a couple of minor exceptions to that, but generally speaking, workflow is included in that. There was a second part to that question. It was around Integration Designer. So Integration Designer supports a way of building kind of microflows, so like multi-step automations. It's a capability that's been around for a while. What we're doing is we want to keep that same capability going forward in it. We might evolve it in some other ways, but if you're currently using Integration Designer and BPEL, it's still part of the supported offering in the on-prem version.
Excellent. Hey, Jim, thank you. Jared, thank you. Scott Bird here again. We're going to close up here. Jim, could you go ahead and show that slide that shows the next couple of webinars coming up as well, as we are over time, and we're sorry about that for everybody. We try to keep it under the half hour. There's so much good stuff to share here. And Jim, further to the point that you just made a moment ago, I mean, Cloud Paks are pretty new, and the progress that IBM has made so far has been astounding. And there's a lot of good roadmap and futures on Cloud Pak for automation in particular, and all the benefits of running it in containers and the like, and the licensing benefits as well. But as a reminder, folks, this is we just completed part 2 of our webinar series, and part 1, if you didn't see it, is recorded and it's pretty good. So you might want to jump out on integro.com and you can find that and watch the recording. And then we have 2 more coming up. In April, we have ECM and capture, which is important about the Cloud Pak for automation and its content management capabilities. And then also in April, only about a week after, is going to be an hour-long, more of a technical, I don't know about technical deep dive with it being an hour, but it's going to be considerations in planning. And it will be an hour long and more for our technical audience to evaluate or consider what to do as you're implementing it. So we're at 1:35. Sorry we ran long. Everybody, thank you for hanging in there. I can see by the attendee list, almost nobody dropped off. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Lindsay.